For 21 days, I was lying supine on my back with thoughts of a broken dream, a shattered dream, the thing which I had loved the most, at a time when everybody else, my peers, were going off to college, enjoying life, doing what people do at that age. I was figuring out things in coaching institutes with a shaved head. At one day, I remember I completely broke down. My belief, my demons, they took hold of me. They won and I lost on that day. And I said that I am going to quit. So after the interview, I went into the period of the biggest suspense of my life. On that day, it was proven. This is the story of how one idea, one principle that I can write in one sentence has changed a shy, clueless kid with no interest in academics into somebody who cleared the UPSC exam thrice. It is also the story of that one principle which changed that shy, clueless kid into a champion powerlifter, a champion bodybuilder representing the country. And more importantly, it is the story of you and how that principle applies to you, because it does. Hi everyone, I am Ravi Kapoor. I am an IRS officer. I am also a passionate athlete, and I have represented India in international competitions in powerlifting and bodybuilding. And so it starts in my childhood, and I was born as a shy kid. I never did well in school. I never had any academic inclinations. I never did show any intellectual competency. I never exhibited anything special really. I was never really good at anything at all. And so I was labeled. I was categorized. I was categorized as average, mediocre, stupid even. And the problem with that is it became internalized. This label became my identity. And I started to feel that there was something wrong with me, that there was something deficient, that something was missing. And this made me angry. And it made me resentful. And I had no way to channel this anger or this resentment. The breakthrough came when I found bodybuilding, I found athletics, I found sports. And as I found sports, after having slogged myself through the school system, just barely surviving, I found my medication, my meditation. I found the thing which I loved the most. I found bodybuilding and athletics. And where I had never experienced what focus is, because I was able to focus. I never could understand what was going on in school and why it was being taught to us. I found that I was able to hyper-focus in the gym. I wasn't doing the bodybuilding or the training just to look good. I wasn't doing it to have some grades or to pass some exams or to just prove to somebody that I was doing it purely for the love of it. That was transformational. And I discovered it. And I went along with it. Because when you do something with that intention, when you get so absorbed in that activity, you naturally get good at it. So I got good at it until the point where I started to compete. And I started to compete in championships. To begin with, there were local championships. I started to win those. That graduated and it went on to national championships, which I started to win also. But before I knew it, I was competing for India in powerlifting championships and also bodybuilding championships. I won the Asian bronze medal for powerlifting for India. I won the Mr. Delhi bodybuilding championship, and I won the gold medal in the powerlifting championship in the world championship. This happened over a period of years, and it happened because I was completely, deeply in love with that activity. And I didn't want it for the rewards. I didn't want it for these awards, these accolades, these achievements. The reason I got those achievements was because I just loved the activity itself. And as I did this, and I got better still at it, I could see that this career was taking off. I could see that that kid who had been made to feel stupid, who had been made to feel average, mediocre, was no longer average. But at the same time, because I had been doing all this, now the stereotype of that dumb pehlwan was complete. I was not only just average in academics, now I was a bona fide bodybuilder, a competitive powerlifter, so that stereotype was complete. But the anger remained as I progressed along this path. Bodybuilding, powerlifting, and these sports, they teach you sacrifice. They teach you pain. They teach you discomfort. They teach you to accept this. that transformation occurred. But that anger, again, never left me. And as I saw that the momentum was increasing and my career was taking off, I could almost feel success. I could taste it. I wasn't there yet, but I knew I was getting there. Just before everything was about to change, one fine day, my entire dream collapsed. Everything shattered. That happened because I was selected to represent India in a rugby tournament. Now, people may not know, but rugby is played with a lot of passion in India, although very few people are involved in it. And it's a contact sport. So you are liable to get injured in rugby. And so that's what happened to me. But mine was not an ordinary injury. No ordinary injury. In a practice match, when I got injured, I landed straight in the operation theatre. Straight in the operation theatre for 4 hours straight. The doctor had to fix me up. He had to patch me up because my entire cheekbone was shattered. My cheekbone had been broken. So the doctor's ultimatum was that for 21 days, I cannot sit upright, I can't stand at all, because if I stood, then gravity would force the wound open and I would start to bleed, because the injuries were internal and they were severe. So for 21 days, I was lying supine on my back with thoughts of a broken dream, a shattered dream, the thing which I had loved the most, the thing that had been my salvation, the thing that I had discovered myself, rediscovered myself, found my identity with, had been lost. I knew that much. I knew sports was no longer a career option for me. Apart from this broken dream, to make matters worse, my family was completely dismayed. When I had shown some potential in athletics, now even that was gone. And I had no background with intellectual pursuits. I had no preparation. I had no academic achievements whatsoever. I obviously wouldn't get a decent job. And so they were worried to the point that my mother started to go to astrologers. And they almost pretty much gave up all hope for any success or any good things to occur. I was looking at a life of being average and at best a gym personal trainer, perhaps, was my destiny at that point. And so I asked myself the question, if the body can be transformed, which I knew was possible because I'd done it, can the same thing be done to the mind at that age? Can somebody who has no academic, intellectual background clear the hardest exam in the world, the hardest exam perhaps known to man, intellectually speaking? And I decided to test that. I decided to put it to the test. Somewhere inside me, I knew the answer. But it was a completely different story when I tried to execute this. Because as I went into the UPSC preparation, because it is one of the hardest exams in the world, I knew clearing this would wipe my slate clean. I knew I would find myself faced with this challenge, and it would be the best possible use of this principle at that point in life. So before I knew it, I found myself in a coaching institute for the UPSC preparation. As soon as I went there, I realized I had taken upon a challenge which was much, much, much harder than I had imagined. It's easier said than done, that you can sacrifice and get what you want, but the sacrifice itself is not at all easy. And so I found myself in the coaching institute, sitting in a classroom full of intelligent people, very smart people, very competitive environment, highly intimidating, and in comes a bodybuilder, and to my right is somebody from the IIT, somebody else from IIM, the other person from AIMS, and I was here from the gym. So a complete underdog with absolutely no chance or probability or likelihood of clearing it. A person who doesn't belong, shouldn't be there. It was obvious. I was the only person in that class who ended up clearing the exam, by the way, at the end of the day. But as it went on, I figured that I'd have to sacrifice more. It wasn't enough. I was working hard. I had to give up the thing which I loved the most. I had to stop training because it would deplete me so much. I didn't have the energy it required to really push myself intellectually, because I knew I had a lot of ground to cover. I had to give up the thing which I loved the most. The sacrifice had to be made. I had to stop training. I had to devote myself entirely to this preparation. I had to shave my head for 2 years straight. I made sure that there were no hair on my head because I did not want distractions. At a time when everybody else, my peers, were going off to college, enjoying life, doing what people do at that age, I was figuring out things in coaching institutes with a shaved head. I remember at that time when I joined coaching classes where there were two classes which I had to undertake, one in the morning, one in the evening. And there used to be this gap of 3 or 4 hours before in between each of them. And I would complete one, and I would have 3 or 4 hours with nothing to do. So what I would do is I would go into that other classroom and I would sit in a class without lights, without a fan, in the heat, dripping sweat, and trying to read, but not getting anywhere. It was very frustrating at first. But slowly, as I gave the sacrifice, as I stopped training, as I devoted everything I had to this, I figured something incredible started to happen. Something unbelievable started to happen. And that was that I fell in love. I fell in love with my subjects. I fell in love with psychology. एक point ऐसा आया कि prelims की date release हुई, and as the prelims was approaching, I was getting more and more nervous, and at one day I remember I completely broke down. My belief, my demons, they took hold of me. They won and I lost on that day, and I said that I am going to quit. I can't do this. What am I even trying to do? I am just a bodybuilder. I can't clear the UPSC exam. It's just going to add more embarrassment. It's just going to humiliate me further. It's just going to prove what everybody has been saying all along, that this is not something which I can do or should be doing. On that day, I remember, I called my mother up, who was at her workplace, and I said, I don't want to do this. I'm quitting. She dropped her work. She came home that afternoon, and she took me to a coaching institute where I had been taking classes, where we met the director. And she said that this is what he's saying. And this gentleman said to me one simple thing. He said, if you don't give the exam this time, you will never give it. I knew in my heart that I was giving into fear. I knew I was giving into insecurity. All I needed was that one single push. He gave me that push. And at that point, I knew, on that day, I knew that the result was going to be in my favor. I went into the prelims. I gave the prelims exam. I felt horrible all throughout it. Never achieved the level which I was used to achieving, at least in sports, where I was able to dominate the stage at certain points in time. In the prelims, I felt like I was just barely surviving. I remember coming out of the prelims and told my parents flat out, nahi hoga. I'm failing, Out comes the result in 2 months and my name was there. My name was there. All those people in the class who had been sitting, people from IIT, AIMS, none of them cleared it. Just me. The bodybuilder goes into the mains exam. The mains exam was relatively easier because I found my love for the subjects. And I knew I'd clear it. But then comes the interview. And because I had completely isolated myself for 2 years, I had no social skills at that time. I hadn't calculated that would be a problem. I remember walking into my first interview, in my first attempt, and the chairperson asked me, why don't you do modeling? Why don't you walk the ramp? Why have you come here? And at that point, I didn't have a good answer for it. Didn't have a good answer for him because I had become so socially constricted, so stunted at that time, that I didn't know what to say, what could be a clever answer to that. And it immediately hit me. I didn't calculate my sacrifices well enough. I needed to be good at communication also. So after the interview, I went into the period of the biggest suspense of my life. And the day the result came, and I was told by my brother that I cleared the exam, on that day, it was proven. I knew in my heart, but the world then knew also that I am no longer dumb. I am not dumb. I am not intellectually challenged. I got 450 or so rank that year. And in 2010-11, I joined the Indian Revenue Services. And I've been working ever since in that department, where I've had the privilege of litigating, arguing cases on behalf of the government, representing the government on various forums on very technical subjects, such as taxation. I've had the privilege of conducting anti-smuggling, anti-evasion operations. I've had the opportunity to be in charge of managerial positions of entire industrial areas. If I could meet my 16-year-old self, that person, that teenager full of energy but full of self-doubt, person who comes home feeling insecure, feeling that the world is too hard, it's absolutely impossible to succeed, to get ahead of everything that has already been done and overshadowed and completely dejected, I would tell him this: you have no idea what you are capable of. What you are is a nuclear bomb of potential. And that's true for everyone. You have no idea what you are about to do. You have no idea how effectively you will be able to do it. And if you believe that this sacrifice that you are making, this sacrifice is the debt that you are paying, the person, the entity to which you are paying this debt of sacrifice, of pain, of insecurity that you are trying to overcome is the universe. And it is very fair. It is very fair. In fact, it is more than fair. It will give you much more in return than you give. Have faith. Don't quit. Stick to it and keep pushing. Your potential is more than you can ever imagine.
अगर आप इस टॉक के एंड तक पहुंच चुके हैं तो मैं आपको जोश टॉक्स का एक दूसरा रूप भी दिखाना चाहता हूं, जिससे मैं काफ़ी देर से जुड़ा हुआ हूं और मुझे बहुत बहुत ज़्यादा पसंद है कि वो क्या कर रहे हैं। जोश टॉक्स ने एक नया ऐप लॉन्च किया है जिसका नाम है जोश स्किल्स। अब वो नया नहीं रहा, काफ़ी टाइम से है, लाखों लोग उसको अब यूज़ करते हैं। और जोश स्किल्स पे आप अपनी ज़िंदगी के लिए कोर्सेज ढूंढ सकते हैं। वो कोर्स नहीं जो आपको फिजिक्स, केमिस्ट्री, कॉमर्स, बिजनेस स्टडीज पढ़ाएंगे, वो कोर्सेज जो आपकी जिंदगी में आपको कैसे जीना चाहिए वो सिखाएंगे। मैंने खुद जो स्किल्स पे बहुत सारे कोर्सेज बनाए हैं, पब्लिक स्पीकिंग पे, इमोशनल क्राइसिस कैसे हैंडल किया जाए, अपनी पर्सनालिटी कैसे डेवलप की जाए। हर एक कोर्स में डेली क्विजेज हैं, एक्सरसाइजेज हैं, एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत कम्युनिटी है जो आपको सपोर्ट करेगी, आपको इनकरेज करेगी। आज ही डाउनलोड करें जोश स्किल्स का ऐप और उनके कोर्सेज एक्सप्लोर करके अपनी जिंदगी को आगे बढ़ाएं।
Josh Talks is now a Spotify exclusive podcast. The audio version of our talks will be available only on Spotify. If you like this video and you like to listen to more inspiring stories like this, please follow the Josh Talks podcast only on Spotify.
Tell us what you think about this video and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.